All right, so there were some questions going into 3.20. How is Bane going to do? And, if you saw my last video, the Hex Boom video, and you see what's going on in the background right now, honestly, I just can't hide my enthusiasm right now. This has been my best league start of all time. Honestly, this is shaping up to be my favorite league of all time already. I love basically everything about it. I just wish I could play the Sanctum more. And man, Bane feels incredible. And what I want to present today is my favorite form of Bane thus far. We're 9 days into the league. I have 5 days and 15 hours played. Going into this league, I was originally actually thinking of not playing Bane, but then there were some people kind of disparaging the build in the public eye. All right, well, I got to keep proving it. Build's still freaking good, man. And so I played it, and I'm really, really happy that I did. The combination of the Hex Bloom support gem, the strength of curses on monsters, and especially my experience playing a lot of hardcore solo self-found and playing this build quite a bit over the past year and a half, tweaking it constantly, trying every single variation that I could. This is my favorite version of the build ever. It absolutely takes everything down that I needed to. On 50 Chaos, I killed Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds. And on 1 Divine, I killed Maven and Uber Elder. I got all my Void Stones for 1 Divine. Now, 9 days into the league, I have invested about 25 Divines, which is about the end of where I'm looking at for like solo self-found viability. I'm going to be pushing it a little bit further, a little bit more min-maxing, but where it is right now, I think is just the perfect completed final form. Really reinvigorated my love for the archetype that I'm actually going to be probably playing it for another week before I go into transitioning into a second build or trying anything new, because it does everything that it wants it to do. It plays like a glove. Like, it fits so perfectly. Like, when I want to express myself through the video game and enforce my will within the world of Rayclast, this is the perfect build for me. Now, it's not the highest damage build. It's not the fastest build. This has been old trusty meat and potatoes. I know that I can league start this and accomplish all of my goals. And just having something comfortable like that is everything that I like. I wouldn't be surprised if this video ends up being a little bit long. I'm just going to sit here and talk. If you care about this build, if you're interested in this build, if you're Bane curious, I'm just going to sit down and talk my whole thoughts about this. What I really think about this build as a template for you to customize it yourself. This is my favorite build in the game. That's why I get a little defensive when people disparage it, because I don't know, I have a ton of fun. Gets my goals done. To me, that is objectively a good build. So anyway, long intro long. Let's get over to it and just start talking.
I will bathe this world in glory. You know
This is not like a beginner build guide or anything like that. Really, that 318 video, it has so much detail. It is for the staff archetype, which is the way that I played it up until this league, basically. That's actually still what I recommend for the beginner first time you play the build. It has the most logical scaling. It is the most, for like 5 chaos, you're off the ground with a Cane of Unraveling. This is kind of like my hybrid hardcore solo self-found version that I also view as a template that I actually modify pretty often based on the content that I'm doing. I really try to like customize it based on, am I fighting a boss? Am I doing the Sanctum? Am I mapping? And we're going to go over all those options. If you don't know anything about this build at all, watch that video. So why do I like this build? What is it? What are all the pieces? Let's start from the fundamentals. And then I really want to start with the first thing. It's annoying that it's called like the Bane build. Bane is really just like the fuel for the engine, the complete build. And like that might be a little bit of the confusion when people, talk down about this build. There's, oh, Bane's bad. But Bane is not everything about this build. It is a combination. It's a chaos dot occultist, a combination of Bane, Essence Drain, and Blight. And that's really what, brings the whole build together, lets us do a little bit of damage, let's just say. What are we doing here? So Bane is a spell that applies the linked curses as long as they're about the same level. There's a little bit of a slush there, but you do have to be careful. You see that it says only applies hexes, not curses, from curse skill gems requiring level 86 or lower. Also, just additional detail, Bane is a hex skill, but it is not a hex. So, anything that says, hexes last forever, like Hexmaster, does not apply to Bane. Bane is a hex skill. Yeah, so what it does is it does chaos damage. It has a 48% more damage multiplier per curse, but that is a single additive multiplier. So it's not 48 times 48 times 48. It's 48 plus 48 plus 48, and that's your one multiplier. Just like your increased damage or increased damage taken if you're familiar with your damage calculations. We are linking Bane with, I'm using an Empower. This is absolutely not necessary. This is just Bane gets bigger when it has higher level, and I wanted a bigger AoE. You could use Void Manipulation here, and it would be like the same damage, but I just wanted a bigger Bane. So Bane with Punishment, Despair, and Tempt Chains, and then you saw Hex Bloom in there. Watch my previous video if you want to know how Hex Bloom works with the Curse Proliferation, Profane Bloom, Herald of Ash, all those explosions. I'm not going to go into that detail now. For doing more damage, we just use Control Destruction. Hex Bloom is just for mapping, doing really big explosions, and going super, super fast. So that's really like the main fuel for the engine. And while you're mapping, you're really only pressing Bane. You're really not pressing any other buttons. Once in a while, you'll press Vol Blight or just like regular Blight to get a little bit additional damage on the monster. But Bane is what you're casting 99% of the time. And it blows up entire packs because of Profane Bloom. And then while you're mapping, we use Herald of Ash as well. You know, I like Divergent here because it's increased AoE. Herald of Ash combines with Profane Bloom, and the overkill damage there will just lead to bigger explosions because it can kind of chain, and it chains even more with Hex Bloom. So that's the core of the build. The way that most spells and chaos spells in particular scale by default, you know, by the easiest scaling is gem levels. That's like the most important thing that we're looking for here. So we're just trying to get as many gem levels as possible on all of our gear. And then that's where we just get every single gem level up to 30 is 10% more damage. Then it falls off really quickly. It's like a soft cap up down to 5%. So we want to get our gems up to level 30. That's the easiest scaling. And that's why this is such a good league starter, is because just playing the game and getting your gem levels up, you're just going to be finding 10% more damage every time you get more levels. So going from like level 15, 16 gems when you hit maps up to level 20 gems, you know, when you get to about the end of yellow into early reds, you're going to scale up to T14 maps on literally 0 gear, and it's going to feel smooth, and you're not going to hit a wall the entire way through. And then when you get to T14 maps, you know, you're going to do this a little bit earlier, but you can just buy like a Cane of Unraveling with +2 chaos gems and some chaos dot multiplier, and then you're good to go from there. That's going to push you into T16 maps and feel really, really comfortable. To me, the staff archetype is so good for just getting off the ground and just kind of playing, you know, just playing the game. That's still what I recommend to newer players. And then, you know, as I just said, the combination of Bane, ED, and Blight. We have Blight and ED linked in our gloves right here. What we can do is we craft with an Essence of Delirium, which has socketed gems deal 30% more damage over time. This does not cost more mana, and it is just a free 5-link in your gloves. So it's really, really comfortable to just put your ED and your Blight in your gloves. And then you're on like a double 4-link right there, basically for free. Traditionally, in the staff archetype, you would just have your Bane in your staff, and then you'd have like a +1/+1 level body armor, or a Skin of the Lords or something like that for your Blight and ED. That's really going to push your single target, you know, a little bit higher. Like, I think that version of the build with the gear that I've put together this league, I think you're probably looking at like 12 to 14 million DPS. I haven't checked, but you know, big staff is definitely really good damage. That's the core of the spells here, is you're basically just baning around. We are using Shield Charge with Flame Dash. You know, the awesome thing here is Shield Charge with Flame Dash is just incredible movement and like fluid ability to get around the map. And that's just something that if you're just walking around and just flame dashing, or I mean, Leaf Slam just feels so bad with a slow staff on a witch. You know, that's the traditional way that I've played it. And, you know, it's fine. You know, you're just walking around. You can press Withering Step and just do this and occasional flame dashes. And that's okay. But being able to shield charge and then weave in some instant flame dashes, you know, if you didn't know, if you flame dash about every 0.5 seconds, instead of trying to spam it, it's actually an instant flame dash. Something that some people apparently didn't know. They're just like, why are you using flame dash instead of Frostblink? I really, really like Flame Dash because it has multiple charges. Frostblink, if you Frostblink away from a pack of monsters, then you have to wait for the whole cooldown. Whereas Flame Dash, I have 3 charges and I can just go again. As soon as you get like that cadence going of, you know, shield charge, Flame Dash, shield charge, Flame Dash, it is so fast and you can just get around. You know, you're zooming as fast as like any build in the game, really, you know, besides like a Headhunter Mageblood build. So yeah, that's like the core of the mobility on the build. The Withering Step here is really just a front load Wither stacks. You will get phasing with this. You know, I'm using a Quartz Flask, but if you need phasing still to run through some monsters or something, that can be really convenient. It's a good way if you're going to blow up a big pack of monsters or something, just Withering Step in and then Bane, and they're going to take a lot more damage because they have a lot of Wither stacks on them already. But never, ever, ever, Cute Dog, I'm looking at you. Do not use Withering Step on left click. It is objectively wrong. We only use Withering Step I know it makes you run a little bit faster. But we really only use Withering Step to get those Wither debuffs on the monster. And you'll notice that when I press Withering Step, my Flame Dash stops recharging, right? And you actually just run, you can't get, oh, I'm out of Flame Dashes because I'm pressing Withering Step too much. It just severely hampers your mobility. And losing those Flame Dash charges is really, really harmful. It's just a bonus utility for more damage. You can use it once in a while if you want to run a little bit faster, and, it can feel nice for that. But using it all the time on left click is just, please do not do that. So we have Withering Step, Shield Charge, faster attacks, and then I'm using Immortal Call, cast no damage taken with Life Tap here. Since I have so much life and I'm such a tanky character, I'm actually using Immortal Call here with level 20 cast no damage taken, and it's actually kind of our best defensive guard skill. Like, Steel Skin on left click is okay, but I would much rather mitigate any follow-on damage after taking one big hit, honestly, than a tiny little dinky Steel Skin. I might lower the level on this a little bit. I do think this is a little high. 3,200 damage taken. That's not that much compared to my, my 7,500 life. Maybe getting this down to like 2,000, 2,500 would be a little bit more comfortable. So I might re-level these a little bit. But very, very importantly is we also use Life Tap support here. You'll notice that Immortal Call costs 78 mana with cast no damage taken. And that's not going to trigger. If I'm casting a lot of spells here really quickly, it's pretty easy that I could be less than 78 mana. And you want to make sure that your Immortal Call or whatever it is can always go off. Now, with the auras, you can 100% use Determination, go armor. That's actually what I did at the beginning of this league, but I ended up getting so much life and just leaning entirely into Evasion ES that I ditched armor entirely. But you can 100% do that if you want to instead. Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, I'm using Vitality, and that is the core of the utility gems here. Now, the auras is a much more complicated discussion. If we look here, I wrote down many reservation options. This was a thing that actually ended up kind of being there a lot of confusion, is in the 318 guide, I show a bunch of auras, and I say in the video, customize these how you want. But a lot of people, they miss that line, and they just download the POB, and they're like, how do I reserve them all? And this really speaks to how I think of the build as a template that you can customize how you want. I mean, just a few days ago, I had a full dragon scale. I had, dragon scale, whatever, everything. I was doing a lot of like hybrid evasion and armor, and then sneaking in as much ES as I could. And it was pretty good, right? Like, it actually felt really good using a granite flask. I had about 22,000 armor with my flasks up, which is really good while you're mapping. The problem is, like, that's just not enough armor. And I had like, I don't know, it was like 10,000 armor without my flasks up. And the problem is, when you're fighting a boss or, anything that has like a really big hit, that is just not enough armor. You really want like 20 to 25,000 armor without your flasks up. And then about 30, 35, or 40K, the more is the better, the way that armor works. You really need big armor to mitigate anything notable from like a big hit. And so it made mapping very comfortable. I just basically was never noticing taking any damage while I was mapping. It wasn't enough armor to like matter while I was bossing, to the point where I was actually swapping out Determination for something like Malevolence to do more damage. And then I was sitting there with like a cast no damage taken Molten Shell that was doing literally nothing because I had no armor. And it was just really awkward. The thing with Witch, she is the pure intelligence character. Like, if you didn't, if you're not familiar with the way that the tree is really laid out, this is the intelligence area, this is the dexterity area, and this is the strength area. And then the classes in the middle here are actually the hybrid, right? Templar is actually the strength intelligence character. Shadow is the dexterity intelligence character, right? And Witch is the pure intelligence character. And unfortunately, pure energy shield is an awful defense layer. It's just really bad. It's just arguably like the worst pure defense layer in the game. Like, if you could go full armor or full evasion or full ES is like way below the other two options. So we're forced to, go hybrid defenses no matter what. And because we have to go to Whispers of Doom, and then we're going into Atrophy, and it naturally pushes us down here because like Wasting is so good, and then Charisma is so strong over here. You could argue for going into Acrimony and then Corruption, but this is just a way weaker option, if you want to go for the strength and armor version. It's just not worth doing that way. Like, I think we kind of have to go over here for this build, especially the added Steep and Profane. It's really making us right side leaning. And so I didn't have access to any armor nodes really. Like, you could get like small cluster jewels or something for like more armor. and endurance charges, but it just felt like an awkward hybrid. Now, if I was playing hardcore, I would 100% just say that's mandatory. I would still keep the armor. I would even try to invest even harder into the armor, like probably skip going down here, going to acrimony and look for some armor, like come down here into discipline and training, sanctity, stuff like that. Just get some more armor and defense there. But for this variation, I do really, really like leaning entirely into Ghost Shrouds and ES evasion. And as you can see, we have access to a lot of life and energy shield, which gives us a great buffer for when those big fist hits do come in. Now, I have thought about getting some endurance charges. You know, you can always use Enduring Cry, you can use small armor jewels, and you can really just lean into that if you want to. It is not impossible to use this tree and still get a decent amount of armor, but I just nixed it and said, I'm just going to lean all the way into this, and it feels pretty good. It feels good enough. So yeah, that's what I've ended up doing personally. I've chosen not to use Determination, but you 100% can. So I am primarily using Grace, Vitality, and Defiance Banner. That's like kind of like my core. Defiance Banner is like not a big deal, especially with the nerf. It's pretty weak, but since it doesn't reserve that much, it's really, if you can fit it in, still fit it in, right? It's giving us 25% increased evasion, 40% reduced critical strike chance from enemies. I turn it off when it's not doing that much. It's not huge. Now, a big thing that people don't do is actually place their Defiance Banner. When I am fighting a boss, I put this puppy down and it'll taunt the enemies, and they actually deal 15% less damage. That's still something that is really, really good that Defiance Banner just has. Like, place your Defiance Banner, it does something. But yeah, I turn that thing off when, if my mana gets way too tight. I'm also using Flesh and Stone, which is an aura that I think people, it does cost 25% mana. A lot of people don't think of it that much, but I still think after the nerfs, if you're going in evasion, it's still pretty valuable. Nearby enemies are blinded while in sand stance. We always stay in sand stance. We don't go to blood. Any nearby enemies, which is within the circle, they're blinded, so reduced chance to hit us. With my Flasks up, I currently have 78% evasion, 30,000 evasion, 78% chance. If they're blinded, you'll see they have 20% less accuracy rating. That just makes them way less likely to hit us. Really stacks on top of our evasion in a very comfortable way. And then enemies not within that circle are actually dealing 16% less damage, which is probably more than our armor was actually doing, versus some very big hits. So I'm using Flesh and Stone to kind of like shore up the lack of armor right there. And that's like in my mapping configuration. And then we also use Herald of Ash here, like I said, with the Profane Bloom for really big explodey. If you want to go into ES even more, you can use Discipline, but I very much only think of ES as like an additional bonus layer. It is not the core of our defenses. Really, the only reason that I care about getting ES is, Witch just gets a lot for free, very high intelligence. There's just ES nodes laying around. And Ghost Dance is right here, and Ghost Dance is really good. With 30,000 evasion, every Ghost Dance Shroud is actually recovering 900 ES. So you want to make sure, you want to do that calculation and multiply your evasion times 0.03. You want to make sure you always have at least that much ES, which will make sure that you're getting as much value out of your evasion there. Every 6 seconds, that's like a 2,700 life pool buffer, which is pretty incredible, right? Like, don't sleep on Ghost Shrouds. They're very, very good. So yeah, that's for like my defensive auras generally. And then kind of looking at the way that I think of this as build archetype, Flesh and Stone, Herald of Ash here, and even Defiance Banner, they're doing so little when I'm fighting bosses that they're actually just kind of low value auras. And I know a lot of people, they don't like gem swaps, they don't like flask swaps or anything like that. I, on the other hand, I don't want to have to do it every single map, right? Like, I don't touch my gems when I'm mapping. But if I'm going to go into a boss encounter, right, I very much value doing super smart things that really can steer the fight in my advantage, right? If I'm going to fight Searing Exarch, I don't need a Quicksilver Flask for Searing Exarch, right? Put in a Ruby Flask that triggers when he hits me, and then boom, I'm taking 20% less fire damage taken. Or I'm fighting Eater of Worlds, and I can trigger a Topaz Flask when I hit him just to make sure that it's up all the time. And then that way I'm taking 20% less lightning damage taken, right? So I like to swap things in just to put that fight in my favor. And so when I'm in my mapping configuration, I'm using Hex Bloom and Flesh and Stone, Defiance Banner, Herald of Ash. But when I'm going to fight a boss, I don't need Flesh and Stone. I don't need Herald of Ash. I turn off Herald of Ash and I unsocket Flesh and Stone. That lets me put Malevolence in. Just kicks my damage much, much higher. And even further, Grace isn't doing that much, right? Like, the scariest stuff that a monster is going to do to you, like a boss specifically, is it's going to be a big spell or ability or something. Like Cirrus's little auto attack, that's not what's going to kill you. And like, yeah, Grace is going to make my Ghost Shrouds better, but you know what's an even better defensive layer? More damage. So actually what I do is I turn off Grace, turn off Defiance Banner, and then I turn on Zealotry. And then this way, with Malevolence and Zealotry turned on, and just Vitality, that's my only defensive aura is Vitality here, I am doing way, way more damage. I think Essence Drain says about 160k damage in my mapping configuration. Now it says 356. And that's like really the night and day difference that turning those auras on can be. You could use Divine Blessing support if you wanted to do that. That way I could turn on Zealotry periodically, still keep Grace on. And that's actually a thing. I level up a Divine Blessing. That I might do that. But yeah, like just be very cognizant of how much value you're getting from, you know, certain defensive auras and stuff like that. Like auto attacks for certain bosses could be very, very meaningful, and you know, they could be scary. But by and large, it's like, I don't know, I find it's usually abilities and all that. And I would rather do 9 million DPS and kill the boss really quickly than 7 million DPS and just have evasion, right? That's the way that I think of it, but customize it how you want. And that's what I really want to get across is, put this together how you like. All right. And then on top of that, for utility and hybrid, you could use Tempest Shield if you're using a shield variation, Arctic Armor, Clarity of Mana is still uncomfortable. I'm using Flesh and Stone. And Aspect of the Spider, if you can fit it in, it is tough to fit in, is really, really good. The problem is like the RMR, you can't socket Enlighten with your Aspect of the Spider, which is really annoying. So it's going to reserve a lot of mana. So I'm not bothered with that at all right now. And then just a bonus thing, we got those new invocations on the Sanctified Relics. Ghost Dance and Iron Will are basically the only two good ones on this build. So Iron Will will roughly give you about 30% increased damage. And then Ghost Dance would actually allow us to change our passive tree and unspec all these points right here. Probably just still take these 3 points, but then we can save going over here, which is pretty cool. All right. Long video long. Let's keep going. To the gear section. So I'm very, very happy with how I approached gearing this league. You'll notice that I don't have a single unique item. That is very much on purpose. And while my wand would be a little tricky to make in solo self-found, the rest of the gear that I have is 100% solo self-found viable. And I even built this character, like I said, go more into determination and endurance charges for hardcore, but this is also very, very easily hardcore viable. I know because I started this build last league in hardcore solo self-found. You can play this build how you want. As I said, what I did this league is I started doing, armor, evasion, and energy shield. But over the past couple days, I went pure evasion and energy shield, and I'm really proud about what I made. Let's go over what I did. So we'll start with the wand right off the bat. This is the more expensive version of the wand. The fractured base was 8 divines, and then I just threw it into Reforged Chaos over and over again. There's a few different things you can do. You can use Essence of Woe, which is actually probably the right way to craft this, and I'll probably recraft this with that. Essence of Woe will give you spell damage prefix. You just want to do that until you hit plus chaos spell skill gems, and then you can just do prefixes can't be changed, use a veiled chaos orb, anything like that. Or you can use the fossils exact same way we craft the fossil staff, the +5 staff. We use corroded, shuddering, and metallic in a triple fossil resonator, and that has the highest chance of giving you spell damage and chaos spell skill gems. And then what I did, prefixes can't be changed, veiled chaos orb, I got the cast speed. I actually very, very, very highly cast speed this league, particularly because of the Sanctum. I want to be able to get my spells out really quickly and then just keep going so the Sanctum guards don't hit me. So yeah, that's how I crafted this wand. This is the much more expensive version. You can get a lower level wand that has fractured spell damage or fractured chaos spell skill gems, and just kind of spam for good prefixes on there. Or you can just buy one for like 50 chaos or less. My old wand had like 80% spell damage, chaos spell skill gems, and some other random stuff. And that was really, really good. Cost me about 50 chaos total. Also, you really want chaos top multi, of course. Based on your budget, go for whatever you want to do. The more I look at this, the more I know I have to recraft this wand. That tier 6 spell damage is embarrassing. And then very similarly on the shield, we want to go for chaos spell skill gems and spell damage. What I did here is I bought this base for like 30 to 50 chaos, threw it into Reforged Chaos. Very specifically, it is a lower item level, which makes it a lot easier to hit the mods that you're going for. There's way less stuff in the pool. I ended up with tier 3 spell damage, which is great. Spell damage is actually kind of tricky to hit. Spell damage is actually a much, much better fracture, but it costs a lot more. And I valued having a lot of life here. I actually do have a better shield here that we're going to craft up on stream today. Like I said, a better fracture is the spell damage. Spell damage is actually the lowest weight on the prefixes. So this is going to be an interesting craft to do. It's going to be expensive. I really wanted to make the video right now because this is like the break point where, I've only spent 25 divines right now, a week into the league. This is basically solo stuff on viable. I think this is a good break point. After today, we're going to kick this into higher gear, and I'm just going to stop tracking my currency and just try to, push this build as far as I want to. And this is going to be like such a tiny upgrade for the build. This is when you start spending way too much money on stuff. This is my shield. Like I said, the total cost of the shield is like 100 chaos. Something like this is exactly what you want. If you can just go for fractured spell damage, just like fractured tier 3 spell damage, reforged chaos, solo aberrant fossils, you can get something like this very, very easily and very cheaply. The amulet here, my total cost of my amulet, I tracked it, was 15 chaos. That's the total cost of this amulet. I bought the base for 10 chaos. I threw it into like 2 reforged chaoses. I hit all chaos spell skill gems, and this is good enough. Ideally would be like +1/+1 with life, or spell damage +1 life, something like that on the prefixes. The +1 minimum frenzy charges is actually really good. It's actually significantly noticeable damage on the character, more attack speed, more movement speed, and a 4% more damage multiplier. It's actually noticeable. So I do recommend trying to sneak that in either on a ring or on your amulet if you can. The helmet here, I just got the cheapest enchant that I could. This was 10 chaos for blight damage. You can go for everything from blight damage, Bane AoE, Bane curse effect, punishment curse effect, despair curse effect, temp chains curse effect. They're all good. Whatever floats your boat, whatever's the cheapest, whatever fits your budget, they're all really, really good. Ideally is probably Bane curse effect still, but the blight damage is actually pretty good. Blight is our single highest damage spell. So I just did this. You'll notice a theme here with my crafting is I just use Essences of Greed. You'll get about tier 1 life with the Deafening Essences of Greed. At time of recording, they're about 5 to 6 chaos each, 7 or so in bulk. And then I went for Despair Curse Effect and increased spell damage on the Eldritch Implicits. Is this as good as the Crown of the Inward Eye? Probably not, but it has evasion on it, and it gives me spell suppression. This was actually very important as I used it until I hit spell suppression. I am actually spell suppress capped on this build, which makes it extra comfortable, particularly for running Eater of Worlds altars. Those lightning spam monsters, that's actually a spell. Spell suppression cap is like night and day for fighting them. And then I went for, I'm going for as much evasion and ES as I can get on the build. Very easy to craft gear, right? And I want to like very much emphasize that you can just craft this stuff yourself. This is all SSF viable. Just put essences on your map device, farm them up. I'm actually probably going to switch into essences myself. I think they're pretty good right now. And then let's go to the gloves. As I said, everything at least has to have evasion on it because we're using the mastery here for 12% more spell suppress. Because we need evasion on all 3 pieces, and that will allow us to hit that spell suppression cap. I went for spell suppress on as many pieces as I need to hit 100%. Also, a thing to watch out for when you're calculating your spell suppression is don't look at the number in your character sheet right here. It says 100, but I'm actually at over 110 because Revenge of the Hunted, when you have full life, will give you that plus 10%. If I take off my body armor, you'll see I'm actually at 98% right here. Which means I'm actually at 88%, which means I need 12% from my body armor. Just be very aware when you're calculating that Revenge of the Hunted is bamboozling you. Always double check you'll see right here. It'll say plus 16 in Path of Building. Helmet was Essence of Greed. Body armor was Essence of Greed as well. Just went for at least tier 2 spell suppression. And then anything else was good. And then we crafted life on the prefix. Nothing crazy. I went for Malevolence and Non-Curse Aura Effect. On the implicits right here, just more damage, more general aura effect. The boots, I did this with Essences of Zeal, which will give you 32% movement speed, which allows you to use a non-eye level 86 base. 35 or 42 is ideal, but what I did here is I bought a fractured spell suppression base, which made it a lot more comfortable. Ideal here is probably just get like fractured movement speed or anything like that, and then I can just craft until I hit spell suppression. And I could go for more life. And that's probably like a way that I would improve this build. Mana regen enchant here is actually really important. Mana does kind of get a little bit tight. You could drop Defiance Banner and use Clarity if you want to deal with mana a lot more. I really like this enchant. And then cooldown recovery rate of travel skills, more flame dashes, increased action speed. Since we are both casting and using attacks, attack, cast speed, and movement speed are all affected by action speed. Increased action speed is almost always better than movement speed as your Searing Exarch implicit here. And then the gloves, I bought this fracture base for, 10, 20 chaos. And then I hit it with Essences of Delirium, which give us that socketed gems, 30% more damage over time. Did that until I hit spell suppression. As you can see, everything else is not very good. The hybrid evasion life is okay. And then tier 8, I slammed. I actually ended up, I did slam that 2 life per second. And then I got the additional spell suppression on the implicit with the chaos dot multi with the unique enemy in the present, right? Like normally that's like 7 to 10%, but we really want more damage on unique enemies. So I went for that version of it, which just helps us for fighting, bosses, right? Which is when it's most important. So we get really, really big chaos dot multi on the implicit there. Never use Apothecary's gloves, not to mention they are armor and ES based, so there's no evasion on them. And this is how much damage you can get, with these new Eldritch implicits. Apothecaries are just bad now. My belt, you might notice that it looks like a hunter base. I don't have a single hunter mod on this. Ideally, on the prefixes, I would have tier 1 life, I would have tier 1 increased life, and I would have tier 1 increased chaos damage, and the increased life percent. Those are both hunter mods on the prefix. You can do this by throwing it into Reforged whatever. I crafted this with Essences of Envy I want to get my Chaos Res up. I want to cap my Chaos Res. I really rely on this also for my strength. So the prefixes on this are absolute trash. Elemental damage with attacks does nothing for this build. So this is just like a nothing belt. Like this does not need to be hunter influence right now. Just craft it with some essences. This is just a stat socket right now. The ideal enchant here is Withered Enemies -6 res. That's obviously really good since we always wither. And so yeah, this belt is like nothing. This is like a budget crap belt. My jewels are just strength, life, res, stuff like that. Now my rings here, as I said earlier, I very, very, very much value cast speed. And rarity is pretty good too. I actually did end up incidentally. I'm at 33%. I was higher before. Rarity is pretty good. It is just good for a little bit better drops. But the big thing that I valued here is I bought this fractured cast speed base, 10 to 30 chaos. Like all these bases I'm buying really, really cheap. Iolite ring for the increased chaos damage is really good. You could go for a synth base as well if you wanted to. What we do is we craft this with the Essence of Envy. We hit that with the Noxious Catalyst to get the increased chaos damage modifiers. Then we craft this with Essence of Envy, which gives us that chaos damage, and we just spam it until we hit something good. I crafted both of these for between 50 to 100 chaos. This was a cast speed fracture, and then this one was, and this one's not fractured at all. This one is actually a Crusader base, because Crusader also gets increased spell damage on the prefix, and I was just kind of hoping, or percent energy shield as well. And I just spammed it with a couple essences until I hit pretty good stuff. But I could obviously make this a lot better. Maybe just go for a fractured base and try to make something better further down the line. But yeah, this ring is not min-max. As I said, this is really a break point for where I think the gear is solo self-found viable. And as always, my profile is always public. You can just import it. You go to Path of Building right here, import build, just type in Subtractem, go to Sanctum League. You can always import my character. Just so you know, like if you want to follow along with my updates that I've done with this build after now, I'll probably not make any more videos about this build, this league, unless something crazy happens. This is where I think is just like the end of about solo self-found viable. Definitely a couple things would be a little tricky to hit. Like the wand is obviously a little bit beyond solo self-found, but everything else here is very SSF viable. That is all of the gear that I have on right now. And then like I said, estimated total cost of what I've spent so far is 25 divines, but that also includes an 8 divine base. This was like a 7 divine empower. And then this was like a 2 divine awakened void manipulation. 17, 18 of those divines is just locked up in the wand, this empower, and this awakened void manipulation, which isn't contributing that much to the build. Take like 1 to 2 million off the DPS, and you're looking at like a 5 to 7 divine build, and you're still really, really comfortable. Just like make that really, really clear. Like you do not need these few expensive pieces that I started already pushing it a little bit beyond SSF. But besides these 3 things, you're still looking at like a 6 to 7 million DPS build for about 5 to 7 divines, or very, very SSF viable. Yeah, very quickly, flasks are incredibly important. I need to be hammering this home more and more and more. Flasks are so crucial to the build, to every single build. Flasks are like 30% of like your build just feeling good. I have a Corrupted Blood Bleeding Divine Life Flask. I have all my flasks instilled with used when charges reach full. It's like a fake Mage Blood. You don't have to press your flasks or whatever you use to make your flask go off. It just makes it a lot more comfortable to just like after using a Mage Blood, I just never want to press my flasks ever again. I know it's like sub-ideal for perfectly min-maxing and hardcore or anything like that, but I just never want to press my flasks ever again. So that's just, I'm an instilling boy now, and that's just the way it is. I use Reduced Effective Curses. I actually very much value that these days. With the Hexer modifier, I know it's like not called Hexer anymore because Arch Nemesis is gone, but the Hexer based modifier that we get from rares, it allows you to ignore hexes from maps, right? If I see Enfeeble or Tempt Chains on a map, it's not that bad. Also, there's Curse Reflect, and we reflect our own very strong curses back onto us. That still feels bad with reduced effective curses, but this makes a lot. We have 46% here, and then we actually have an additional 15% here. Or you could go into tolerance here if you care about poison or stun, and you could grab it here. If you want to be fully curse immune. I find like this is enough to feel pretty good when mapping. And then Quartz Flask is just, for me, mandatory for, being able to actually like play the game. Play the game and be able to, walk through monsters, not get stuck on stuff. I'm using a Silver Flask now. There's just nothing better that I thought of to put in here. If I did want more damage, I could toss in a Sulfur Flask. Get that 40% increased damage. The Silver Flask just feels really, really good for just going faster, right? I just want to go really, really, really fast, and getting that Onslaught is incredible. If you can get an Onslaught on hit Synth Ring, more power to you. That's really a great source of Onslaught right now. It's up very high percent of the time. Do recommend that. Then a Jade Flask, we're evasion based, very important. Jade Flask with increased evasion rating during Flask effect. And then I have Quicksilver. Now, Quicksilver, I ended up hitting, I always go for increased effect. I hit attack speed. I actually hit tier 1 attack speed. And I was like, you know what? I'll keep that since I am, I attack a lot, right? With my shield charge, just lets me get around quicker. And then I went for movement speed on the Silver Flask, and then we're good to go there. So yeah, that's my flask. Yeah, so you can see I'm going from 20k to 30k evasion. That's what the flasks do. I do strongly recommend, very much prioritize those flasks. And then in terms of the passive tree here, this is at level 100 also. I hit level 100 last night. That's how much I'm loving this build. I don't think I've ever pushed a character to level 100 in a week. I did do some 5 ways to go from 99.5 to 100. I was just tired. I didn't map it fully naturally, but mostly was naturally. 5 days and 16 hours played. I have just been loving this build so much that, yeah, I wanted to level it up to 100. Also, had a gentleman's agreement with Cute Dog. Gifted sub to whoever wins, and I beat him. He's been losing his XPs a little bit too much. Went up to level 100. Just a quick overview of the character sheet. Max spell suppression. We got some block. We got freeze and chill. I actually have a lot of reduced effective chill. I'm basically chill immune. Freeze avoidance. We got good movement speed, some action speed. I have 77 fire res from a sanctified relic. Overcapped chaos res from my shield right here. Really, really big. Almost 600 life regen per second too, which is pretty awesome as you're just kind of like walking around and degens don't even, you shrug them off. 6,100 life and 1,500 ES. We had access to really large life and ES pools here, which is pretty sick. There's nothing crazy that you'll notice in the passive tree here. There is, the one big new thing here is Steeped in Profane. I had this early and then I unspec'd it, and then now at higher investment, it's starting to, it's one of those things where you always have to double check in Path of Building. Like, are you going to be getting that much value from the nodes? And like at a certain inflection point, it wasn't worth as much. And now it actually is worth a lot again. So yeah, this just gives us 20% increased effective curses, which is, just really good. Not to mention a good defensive layer. Everything else here is totally standard, going for spell damage, stats, life, chaos damage, anything like that on our jewels. These are really good. Do not skip small jewels. I also go for mana regen, attack and cast speed. Like I said earlier, I value that a lot. Same thing, damage over time multiplier, mana, reduced effective chill. This makes us pretty close to chill immune. We have 32% here. And then Pantheon, so the Brine King, fully upgraded, 50% here. This puts us at 82% reduced effective chill. We basically don't even notice it. And then 60% reduced effective shock here. So shock isn't particularly bad also. And then in terms of our one cluster jewel here, I bought this for, I think, 1 divine. Unholy Grace, Unwavering Evil, Wicked Paul. This is best in slot. But this is the harder one to get. Very, very cheap for like 20 to 30 chaos. Instead of Wicked Paul, you can go for Touch of Cruelty, which is 10% increased damage taken, which, is not as good as 30% increased damage and skill effect, but it's still pretty good, and it is way, way cheaper. That's a great stepping stone. And then very specifically, this is what my medium cluster jewels are. I have Flow of Life here, which is actually very low weight. I took this cluster jewel, I bought it, and I threw it into Reforged Life in Harvest until I hit Flow of Life, and anything else. Brute for Potency is really nice, just better flash charges gain. Really not best in slot, though. It's just, I hit it with Flow of Life. Flow of Life is really good. I wanted that life and regen, but Brew for Potency is not the ideal here. Better life recovery, better flash charge gain is really nice. But this one is actually very specifically rolled. Student of Decay, this will allow us to cap our Chaos Res. I was previously using one with Evil here, but changing it into, I was able to change this into Student of Decay and still keep my capped Chaos Res with unspecking those entire, right? It's fun. That's a fun thing that, I like to do is sit here and look at my passive tree and be like, hey, these 3 points, like, yeah, +1 max Chaos Res, that's fine. I can unspec 3 points here, and 3 points alone, right, is almost an entire little jewel, and then, maybe drop a mastery or something. You can get a whole additional medium cluster jewel, which is great. So, Student of Decay here, and then very specifically also Eldritch Inspiration. Like I said, mana is very tight. Losing Replica Conqueror's efficiency this patch. I have non-channeling crafted on both of my rings, as you can see here. And even with how much mana regen I have, like, it's better when I have Arcane Surge, but I stacked a lot of mana and a lot of mana regen, and it's still pretty tight. 100% you can drop Defiance Banner, run Clarity instead. That'll be a great buffer. Also, I killed all bandits. I used Alira actually until yesterday, but then I was able to cap my res, and this is another reason why I had to do the more mana. Respect into killing all bandits. But yeah, Eldritch Inspiration, more mana regen, very comfortable. And then yeah, I recognize that this part of the tree, it's always awkward. Like I keep looking like, could I put this 1 point here and then take that 1 point there? And then I could unspec these 2 points, but then I lose 10 strength, right? Like I recognize that there's a couple, like, it looks kind of inefficient and I could do that. Maybe I do that, but, I think I actually need that 10 strength right now. Maybe I could go for a new small jewel that has strength on it instead, and then I get 1 more passive point, and then I get another mastery, etc., etc. I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer, if you want to take this build to the next level. Another thing that I actually found was pretty significant with the change that I do want to call out, I am no longer using the +1 level and lose 10% life mastery. Previously, we used that to, push our damage as high as possible. This was particularly impactful because we had so much increased damage taken, Wither, Punishment, and Despair. But Despair doesn't do increased damage taken anymore, and Punishment is less effective, which means that Wither is worth more. So the 20% increased effective Wither Mastery is actually worth a lot more to this build now than it used to be. And so I'm actually using that instead of the +1 level of all Chaos Spell skill gems. So we can spam our spells, and we don't have to worry about losing our life anymore, which is really nice. Losing that life sucked. So I just wanted to call that out as well as a nice little, a quality of life change for the build. I think that is the whole build. I don't know if I missed anything. I didn't say the DPS rotation. While we're bossing, when you encounter boss, I like to Wither Step into the boss. I will cast Bane. I will cast ED. ED lasts 6.12 seconds. Actually lasts a lot longer than that. ED lasts like 9 to 12 seconds with Temp Chains on him. So we don't have to cast that very often, right? And the same thing with Bane. The base duration is 3 seconds. That's closer to 6 seconds, actually. So Bane, ED, Flame Dash behind the boss, and then just sit there and channel Blight. Wither Step occasionally. Once the Wither stacks are at 15, they will sustain because of the way that Withering Presence works. It actually inflicts a 15-second Wither. So after 15 seconds, you're always at max. You don't have to use Withering Step at all, unless they phase and then they start to drop stacks, but that's the whole thing. So yeah, Wither Step periodically, Bane every 6 seconds, ED every 10 seconds, and then just channel Blight as much as you can. And at max uptime of your DPS, we're looking at about 9 million DPS. That is when the monster's on low life. It goes from like 8 to 9 million. I know, it's just, whatever. Based on punishment, increased damage taken. It feels really, really good. It absolutely murders bosses. This is not a build that easily scales into Ubers. I will be throwing this at some Ubers and see how it feels. But, lower DPS against Ubers, kind of annoying. But I'll probably be doing that this week just to flex and, and see what I can do. And then if it does take down the Ubers comfortably, then I'll just have even more confidence about this build. But yeah, anyway, hopefully that was enough for you guys. I just sat here and talked for over an hour. I'll try to edit this down as much as I can. But I also just wanted to share what I think about this build with you guys and, my passion for this build. It is just a build that has been around for a while now, in different iterations. I've been maintaining it for a while. And especially with this patch, I think it's taken it beyond just a beginner starter into, like, in my opinion, it is in the pantheon of one of the best starters, particularly beginner friendly, but just one of the best starters you can pick. If you don't know what to pick for League Start, you know, this will carry you to the vast majority of the content in the game and feel really, really good. I don't know. To me, I think it's an undisputed great League starter, and I'm always happy to play it. And I'm particularly happy that I played at this league and took it to this level and really was able to share it with you guys. And now I got to sit down and edit a very long video. I'll try to make it as short as I can. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your interest in this build that I really care about. And, you know, thank you for everyone. A few people signed up for Patreon the past week, and I appreciate that so much. That's, you know, all your support and you guys here in this community. It really means a lot to me. Looking forward to many more years with you guys, sharing, just having fun, and really enjoying, you know, Path of Exile and games in general. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Goodbye.